Welcome to the Research Like a Pro with DNA question and answer series. Today's video is genetic genealogy privacy, choosing the right AI model. And in our last Research Like a Pro with DNA office hours, Diana addressed a question about how to choose an AI model that respects privacy and doesn't train on users' data. So she goes through the main large language models such as ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and Perplexity and discusses how to opt out of training and which AI model she usually uses in her DNA research.
All right, so let's talk for a bit about AI and privacy concerns. When we are working with our DNA, there are so many good uses for AI in helping us to organize things, but we do have this real concern about privacy and living people's names. So I thought we'd talk a bit just about some of the major concerns and spend some time on AI and privacy. So the major concerns, and I had AI help me with this because I thought, why not? AI knows a lot about its privacy issues, right? And so I gave the same basic prompt to all of the AI models, and I'll show you some of the different answers I got, and we can think about these. But the major concerns that Gemini came up were input data usage. So, the AI models using what we put into them. And then the problem of data leakage, anything that we've inputted that could accidentally get out when it wasn't supposed to, and then how it generally handles personal or proprietary information. And of course, if we're working with DNA matches, we have a lot of personal information in there about our DNA matches. What depends on whatever we're putting in. So, ChatGPT in its thinking model 5.1 took a look at all the different models and said that and gave a big picture that applies to all of them. And I asked specifically for ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, Copilot, and Perplexity. And it said, you see the same things. So the AI is logging your prompts, things you upload, and usage metadata. So they are they are keeping track of that. And then default training on the chats is common unless you turn it off in settings. So we always probably should assume it's going to use our information unless we go in specifically and turn it off or learn about what's going on with the model we're using. Data can be kept for months or years, even if you stop using the product. And then they could be compelled to hand over logs in lawsuits or to governments. And so we did have an example of OpenAI fighting a court order. And then if we are using an AI browser, it can see what we're viewing and send full pages back to servers. So, we do live in the era of the internet, and we know that our privacy is not like it used to be before we got online and started sharing so much online and doing so much online. But we also want to be able to use the tools. So the safest assumption, anything you type or show might be stored, analyzed, and potentially seen by humans under some circumstances. So this is giving us a pretty good idea of being careful. Now, I did want a comparison table because I thought it would be easier just to see really quickly what each one does. And so the little icon green is yes, it's clearly true. Triangle is partly true, depends on settings or product tier. And I've really noticed this. It changes on whether you are free or if you're paying the $20 a month or if you're paying $200 a month. There are a lot of different changes depending on what you're paying for. So it's impossible to have something that's just completely accurate for every situation. I think the key takeaway is to realize what you are using, go check it out, and make sure you know what's going on with the models you are using. And so ChatGPT um, it does train on your chat by default, but you can go opt out. Really easy to do that. It has a long retention of your chats. So this depends on how much you're paying. And then heavy use of cross-service ecosystem data. So within its partners, this means that there are other companies that are using AI. using the different models. And so perhaps partners, whoever OpenAI's ecosystem is, I don't even know who that is at this point, but it sounds like they maybe share within their group of other people using the data. So probably the safest thing would just be to opt out for training. Gemini is default. If activity on, you can turn off activity. And Google, I have found, and I'll show you a screenshot of that in just a minute, that they're pretty much nothing is really safe there. So I would not use Gemini if I'm doing anything sensitive with DNA just because of the nature of the beast. Now, Claude trains on consumer chats by default. It's really easy to opt out, turn that off. I'll show you how to do that. It's really easy to do that. Long retention of your chats. And apparently, it's less broad than Google or Microsoft with how it has this cross-service data, ecosystem data feature. And Copilot was the hardest one to figure out looking at that because it's so different depending on what Microsoft product you are using, whether you're using Microsoft 365 or if you're doing the free version or the lesser version. There's just so many different things there. So this is when you have to go in yourself and try to understand what your product is and what your privacy can be there. And it looks like it has long retention of your chats. And then, of course, if you're in Microsoft, you could expect that all across all the Microsoft products that you could be having your information used. And then Perplexity. Perplexity is another one that's just kind of unclear because it does run on top of ChatGPT or Claude. So this is another one I would probably be careful with, putting information in. So you can see there's nothing really clear cut, but there's some that are probably better than others. So I asked for some rankings, and the safest patterns for genealogy work for things that are sensitive, like DNA, living people, sensitive, legal, medical context, Claude. And this is one we kind of taught all along that Claude, if you have the training be off, is good for privacy. Same with ChatGPT, training off. And then Copilot, carefully configured depending on what you're using, what program you're using, and not on sensitive screens. Gemini with activity off, and Perplexity, public web searching only, not private data. So I love the statement. None of these are perfectly private. Some are easier to tame. So concrete recommendations for Claude. And we like to use Claude. We recommend it a lot for reports and proof arguments. And obviously, if we are writing a DNA report, we want to write a DNA report that has the names of our matches. We anonymize as well for public sharing, but for ourselves, we may be wanting to have AI help us to write about DNA information. And so we would want to be able to turn off the help improve training so that we are not going to have that there. And it still recommends to avoid posting full client names and exact date of birth, addresses, and kit IDs altogether. And we don't do that. That type of stuff we put in our Airtable base or keep it somewhere else. I would never put that in a client report anyway. And we could always do something like if we really wanted to use AI and we're worried about this, we could always just anonymize from the very beginning our report and have a key that we know who we're talking about, but not ever put names in AI. So it's good for methodology, locality, context, anonymized case studies, all sorts of ideas there that we can do when we want to use DNA with Claude. And then ChatGPT, everything from write a research plan to summarize this deed, turn off, improve the model for everyone. And the same thing, don't give it full identifiers and use it for your basic locality guides, research plans, citation, anonymized client scenarios. Copilot. Now, this is if you're already in the Microsoft ecosystem. I thought this was wise. If you really love working with Microsoft products and you want to use Copilot, and you're not working with, something very sensitive, then Copilot would be fine. But be aware that it can see more context and don't have anything confidential on there. So I think this is something that, we can remember. Claude's probably the best in ChatGPT. Be careful with Copilot. Be careful with Gemini and be careful with Perplexity. So don't put anything in here that you don't want anybody else, you don't want Google to know. Google ties a lot back to your account. And so I am always wary of Gemini. And same for Perplexity. Treat it like a curious search engine. Do not paste client letters, DNA match lists, or internal reports. So I thought this was just a fun little overview by ChatGPT about all the different privacy concerns. And of course, it goes out and does all the searching and all the different websites, things that have been written, what the actual companies say on their AI website. So, some golden rules for DNA privacy, which I think is really good. Don't put your kid identifiers into it. Makes sense. No direct contact info. Strip names or mask them. We call this anonymizing. Summarizing instead of uploading. So, I want to continue to work a little bit with this because, as we know, DNA has a lot of data, and I think there's a lot AI could do that would help us. So, trying to figure out how to be specific, but not give anything away we don't want to give away. So I'm kind of leery about these using ranges, not exact combos. Keep living people fuzzier than historical content. That'd be okay. And then keep master data offline. Yeah, we want to keep all this somewhere else, like our Airtable or spreadsheets or such. So some good rules there for thinking about DNA privacy with AI. So just a quick screenshot about each one. In Claude, pretty much you just go to your picture for each one of these and then go to settings. And then Claude's very easy to find. It says privacy. You simply turn off help improve Claude. Don't allow the use of chats and coding to train and improve. So if you turn that off, then you will be private. In ChatGPT, you go to settings and then it's called data controls, and you make sure improve the model for everyone is turned off. Anytime it says allow your content to be used to train our models, that's what you want to turn off. You want to make sure your data is not being used to train any models. And then when you go to Gemini settings and help and privacy, it basically is telling you all about their privacy, but it's a little bit trickier to figure out exactly where to turn anything off. So that's why I just am a little bit leery of Gemini and any kind of data that I would put out there. I wouldn't. And then Perplexity, you go to account and preferences, and you can turn off the AI data retention. And if you want to exclude your data from this process, you can do it right there. I pretty much use Perplexity for web searching and some deep research here and there, but I would not use it for putting in a bunch of DNA information or writing reports or anything that would have anything that I'd worry about with DNA. So that is just an overview of DNA and some thoughts about privacy concerns with using AI. AI is just a great tool. It can do a lot for us, but it's always good every once in a while to go back and think about where we are and perhaps to go check our actual models that we're using and see what we have set for letting the models train on our data or not. Very, very good to think about this periodically and to just be up to date because things do change with these models. And so we want to make sure we know what the current way of looking at it is.